The albino dragon should not have been alive. Her scales, once radiant pearl, had dulled to a brittle ivory. The membrane of her vast wings trembled with every breath. Silver veins of magic that once shimmered beneath translucent scales now flickered faintly, like a dying constellation. And she was cold. For a dragon, cold meant something was terribly wrong. Her daughter refused to accept it. Lyra had been told all her life that dragons did not seek help from humans. Humans built cities. Dragons built legends. Humans used tools. Dragons wielded fire. The two worlds overlapped only in conflict or uneasy trade. But trade did not save lives. Her mother, Orethiel the Pale Star, had not risen from the frost peaks in 3 days. The healers of their kind had tried flame infusion, ley line alignment, ancient chants. Nothing reignited the fading glow in Orethiel's chest. "She is shutting down," one elder said quietly. Lyra heard the words. She rejected them, because she had seen something the others ignored. Not magic failing, mechanics failing. Her mother had once flown through a storm of iron ships, human skycraft powered by roaring engines. She had shielded Lyra from explosive debris. One shard, glowing with unnatural blue fire, had pierced deep beneath her scales. It had been removed. The wound had sealed. But dragons healed flesh. They did not understand machinery. Lyra did. She had watched humans from afar for years, observed their workshops, their engines, their improbable talent for fixing what others declared broken. So she made a decision that would scandalize the high peaks. Under cover of night, Lyra lowered her weakened mother from the mountain nest and carried her beyond dragon territory. Each wing beat was agony. Each descent through thinner air risked worsening Orethiel's fragile state. But Lyra did not stop. At the edge of a small human coastal city, there stood a cluttered steel warehouse with a crooked sign. Harlan's Repair and Fabrication. Humans brought broken machines there. Lyra brought a dragon. She landed behind the building just before dawn, shielding her mother's frail body with her own. Orethiel barely stirred. Frost clung unnaturally to her scales despite the warm sea air. Lyra shifted form, compressing her immense dragon body into a humanoid shape with pale hair and eyes like liquid silver. It took effort she could barely spare. Then she kicked open the back door. Inside, sparks flew from a welding torch. The human mechanic, broad-shouldered, oil-streaked, middle-aged, looked up in shock as metal clanged to the floor. He stared at the tall, pale woman standing in his workshop. Then his gaze drifted past her, out the open door, to the colossal albino dragon lying motionless behind his garage. There are moments when fear wins, and moments when curiosity does. He set down the welding torch slowly. "That's not standard equipment," he muttered. Lyra's composure cracked. "She is dying." The mechanic studied the dragon again. Not with terror, with assessment, the way he might examine a crashed engine block. "Bring her closer to the light," he said calmly. Lyra blinked. "You're not running." He shrugged. "Lady, I fixed fishing trawlers after lightning strikes and rebuilt engines that swallowed half the ocean. I can at least look." Together, they rolled back the wide hangar doors. Morning sunlight spilled across Orethiel's pale scales. Up close, the mechanic could see something unusual beneath the rib plating. Faint pulses of blue light, irregular and mechanical. He frowned. "That's not natural." Lyra's voice trembled. "Storm debris. Years ago." He knelt beside a creature that could have swallowed him whole and gently pressed his grease-marked hand against the cold scale. "Feels like interference," he murmured. "Like something's disrupting her internal system." Lyra stared at him. "System? Everything runs on systems," he replied. "Engines. Generators. Probably dragons, too." He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "If there's foreign tech embedded inside her, something still active, it might be draining energy instead of letting her circulate it." Lyra's heart pounded. "Can you remove it?" The mechanic glanced at the dragon's massive form, then back at his modest workshop filled with tools meant for boats and engines. He exhaled slowly. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know this. If it's metal and it's malfunctioning, I can try. Lyra's eyes shimmered with desperate hope. Behind them, Orethiel released a faint, rattling breath, barely audible, but enough. The mechanic rolled up his sleeves. "All right," he said. "Let's take a look under the hood." Lyra almost laughed through her tears, because for the first time in days, someone wasn't speaking of endings. They were talking about repairs. The mechanic's name was Rowan Harland. Lyra learned that as he dragged industrial floodlights across the concrete floor and positioned them around Orethiel's enormous body like a surgical theater improvised from scrap metal and stubborn optimism. "I'll need power. Lots of it," Rowan muttered, running extension cables to an old generator in the corner. "And you're going to have to trust me." Lyra stood beside her mother's massive head, fingers trembling against cold pearl scales. "If you harm her," Rowan didn't even look up. "If I wanted to harm her, I'd have run screaming 5 minutes ago." That earned the faintest flicker of respect. Orethiel's breathing had grown shallow, frost creeping outward from beneath her rib plates. Up close, Rowan could see it clearly now. A faint geometric pattern pulsing under the scales, angular, artificial. Not dragon magic. Not natural growth. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's tech." He grabbed a handheld scanner normally used to diagnose boat engines and pressed it against the scale. The device crackled, screen flickering wildly. Lyra leaned in. "What does it say?" "It says your mother has a foreign power core lodged inside her. And it's still active." Lyra's stomach dropped. "Active?" Rowan nodded grimly. Whatever hit her years ago wasn't just debris. It embedded something. And instead of shutting down, it's been slowly draining her energy to keep itself running. Lyra felt rage surge. At humans, at storms, at fate. "Can you remove it?" Rowan studied the placement carefully. The shard had fused beneath overlapping scale plates near the sternum, close to the dragon's primary flame chamber, if his guess about anatomy was right. One wrong move could rupture something vital. "I can try," he said again, "but I'll need access." Lyra swallowed. Dragons did not allow others to touch their core plates. It was vulnerability beyond measure. She placed her hand against her mother's cheek. "Mama, please." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Orethiel's massive chest shifted. A faint tremor of conscious effort. The scale plates along her sternum separated by a fraction of an inch, revealing a soft inner membrane glowing faint silver. Rowan let out a low whistle. "That's trust." He grabbed precision cutting tools, not blades, but magnetic clamps and microsaws designed for delicate engine extractions. He worked slowly, narrating under his breath the way he always did when focused. "Stabilize the housing. Isolate the foreign object. Don't spook the living furnace." Lyra knelt opposite him, hands glowing faintly as she channeled what little warmth she could into Orethiel's failing system. The albino dragon's pulse fluttered weakly beneath the membrane. Rowan finally saw it. A shard of dark alloy no larger than his palm, embedded deep and wired with thread-like tendrils that pulsed with stolen energy. Blue light flickered erratically inside it. "Got you," he murmured. He positioned the clamps carefully, isolating the tendrils. Each one he severed released a tiny surge of light. Orethiel's body twitched with each cut. Lyra's breath hitched. "Be careful." "I am," Rowan said sharply, but not unkindly. "She's tougher than she looks." The final tendril was fused closest to the flame chamber. Rowan hesitated. If he cut it wrong, the feedback could trigger a surge. He glanced up at Lyra. "When I say now, you push heat into her. As much as you can." Lyra nodded, tears streaking her pale face. Rowan tightened his grip on the tool. "Now," he sliced. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then the shard flared violently blue, before sputtering out completely as Lyra's warmth flooded the chamber. Rowan yanked the dead device free and threw it across the concrete floor, where it clattered uselessly against a tool cabinet. Silence filled the workshop. Then, Orethiel inhaled. Not shallow, not rattling, deep. Heat rolled outward in a wave so sudden it knocked over 2 floodlights. Frost evaporated instantly from her scales. The dull ivory shimmered faintly with returning radiance. Lyra gasped. Mama! Orethiel's massive eyelids fluttered open, revealing luminous silver eyes clearer than they had been in months. She exhaled softly, and this time the breath carried warmth instead of chill. Rowan sat back on the concrete floor, grease-streaked and stunned. Well, he muttered. That'll do it. Orethiel slowly lifted her head, an effort that would have crushed a lesser building, and turned it toward the tiny human sitting cross-legged near her chest. Instead of fear, Rowan felt something else wash over him. Gratitude. The dragon lowered her enormous snout until it hovered inches from him. Warm air flowed over his oil-stained shirt. Lyra held her breath. Orethiel gently pressed her forehead to the concrete beside Rowan. Careful, deliberate, controlled. A bow. From a dragon elder. Rowan blinked rapidly. Ma'am, I just pulled out bad wiring. Lyra laughed through her tears. You saved her life. Outside, the first light of sunrise spilled fully across the harbor. Inside a cluttered mechanic's workshop, an albino dragon's heart burned bright again. Steady, strong, alive. And for the first time in years, Orethiel felt warm. By midday, the entire harbor knew something impossible had happened. Not because anyone had seen the surgery, but because an albino dragon the size of a cathedral was now resting peacefully behind Rowan Harlan's repair shop, radiating warmth instead of frost. Fishermen had dropped their nets. Dockworkers stood frozen mid-crate. A few brave souls climbed rooftops for a better look. Rowan stepped outside with a mug of coffee, squinting up at Orethiel's massive, pearl-white form. Sunlight danced across her scales now, no longer dull and brittle but luminous, almost translucent in places, like polished moonstone. Well, he muttered to himself, that's going to need a bigger no parking sign. Behind him, Lyra stood with her hand resting gently on her mother's foreleg. Orethiel was awake, fully awake now but conserving strength. Healing after prolonged energy drain took time, even for dragons. She wants to thank you properly, Lyra said softly. Rowan scratched the back of his neck. The bow was plenty. Lyra smiled faintly. Dragons do not bow to humans. He shrugged. Guess she's an exception. Orethiel shifted slightly, lowering her head toward him again. This time, her voice did not echo with weakness. It resonated, smooth and powerful, like distant thunder rolling across snowfields. Human Rowan Harlan. Rowan nearly dropped his coffee. Yes, ma'am. You reached into my core without fear. You cut away poison without greed. Why? He thought about that longer than expected. Finally, he gave a small, honest answer. Because something was broken, and I fix broken things. Orethiel's silver eyes studied him carefully. Not as prey, not as curiosity, as equal. Lyra felt her throat tighten. Dragons respected strength, but they revered purpose. Rowan gestured back toward the workshop. That shard you pulled out? It wasn't natural debris. That was military-grade power tech. Probably from one of the old skyship wars. Lyra stiffened. Humans built something capable of harming dragons like that? Rowan hesitated. Humans build a lot of things. Not all of them wise. Orethiel's gaze darkened. Not in anger, but in understanding. It fed upon my fire. Yeah, Rowan nodded. Like a parasitic battery. Designed to leach energy from large power sources. Lyra clenched her fists. Then others of our kind could be infected. Possible, Rowan said quietly. If it happened once, it could happen again. Silence fell heavy between them. Then something unexpected happened. Orethiel carefully extended one wing, not in dominance but invitation. The membrane shimmered faintly, glowing with soft inner light. Lyra's eyes widened. Mother? Knowledge must flow both ways, Orethiel said. You understand machines. We understand flame. Together, we prevent this from happening again. Rowan blinked. You're asking for collaboration? Lyra almost laughed at the disbelief in his voice. Orethiel's lips curved slightly, a subtle dragon expression that might have been amusement. You repaired what dragons could not. That is strength. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt water and engine oil. Around them, curious townsfolk kept their distance, but they were watching. Rowan set his coffee down slowly. If there's tech out there herding dragons, I can analyze it. Figure out how it works. Maybe build a detector. Lyra's heart pounded, not from fear this time, but hope. A warning system. A shield, Rowan added. Something that alerts you before it embeds. Orethiel lowered her massive head again, this time resting it gently on the concrete beside his shop doors. Then we forge something new, she declared. Not an alliance of politics. Not a treaty of fear. Partnership of skill. Lyra felt tears sting her eyes again. But these were different. Not desperate. Grateful. She had brought her dying mother to a human mechanic out of sheer refusal to accept loss. She had expected maybe a miracle. She had not expected a bridge. Rowan rubbed his hands together, already thinking ahead. All right then. Step 1, we study that shard. Step 2, we figure out how to track its signal. Step 3, we protect others, Lyra finished. Orethiel's chest glowed softly as her internal flame stabilized fully. Above the harbor, gulls circled cautiously. Boats rocked gently in the tide. And behind a modest metal workshop, something extraordinary had taken root. Not just a repaired dragon heart, but the beginning of a future where fire and steel didn't have to be enemies. And as Orethiel's warmth spread through the coastal air for the first time in years, Rowan Harland realized something quietly profound. Sometimes fixing a single broken piece doesn't just save a life. It changes the world. The first dragon arrived 3 weeks later. He was smaller than Orethiel but still enormous by human standards, emerald-scaled, limping slightly as he descended beyond the harbor cliffs. Word had traveled faster than Rowan expected. Not through newspapers, through whispers in wind currents only dragons understood. Lyra stood beside her mother as the green dragon folded his wings stiffly. Suspicion radiated from him, but so did pain. Beneath his left shoulder plate, faint blue flickers pulsed through cracked scales. Rowan didn't need a scanner this time. Same parasite, he muttered. The green dragon's eyes narrowed. You are the mechanic. That's what the sign says. Orethiel shifted beside Rowan, her restored glow unmistakable. He removed the corruption from my core. The emerald dragon hesitated. Dragons did not easily admit weakness, especially before humans. But pain erodes pride eventually. Do it, he growled. Rowan wiped his hands on a cloth and gestured toward the now reinforced concrete platform he'd built behind the shop. Lie down. Try not to crush anything expensive. Lyra almost smiled. This time, the procedure moved faster. Rowan had studied the original shard relentlessly, mapping its structure, understanding its siphon mechanics. He'd even built a handheld resonance detector from spare marine components. It hummed softly now, confirming the parasite's frequency. Got you, he murmured again. Lyra assisted with steady, precise heat control. Orethiel monitored from above, her presence alone calming the injured dragon. When Rowan severed the final tendril and extracted the shard, the emerald dragon's roar shook fishing boats in the harbor. But it was a roar of relief. His scales brightened almost immediately. He stared at Rowan in disbelief. You are small, he said. Rowan smirked. Story of my life. The dragon did not bow, but he inclined his massive head, just slightly. For dragons, that was monumental. By the end of the month, 3 more arrived. Then 5. Not all were infected. Some came merely to scan themselves, wary of unseen damage. Rowan's workshop transformed into something unprecedented. Half machine garage, half dragon infirmary. Humans from the harbor adapted surprisingly quickly. Fear softened into awe. Children began sketching dragons from rooftops. Fishermen delivered fresh catches as offerings. Not tribute, but gratitude. The warmth from dragon fire kept the coastal fog lighter than it had been in decades. Something was shifting, but not everyone welcomed it. One evening, as Rowan and Lyra calibrated a newly built detection beacon, designed to emit a warning pulse when parasite tech entered range, a convoy of black vehicles rolled into the harbor road. Military. Rowan's jaw tightened. Knew it wouldn't stay quiet forever. Uniformed officers stepped out, led by a tall woman with sharp eyes and a colder expression. She studied the dragons resting peacefully along the cliffs. "You're harboring strategic biological assets," she said without greeting. Rowan blinked. "Ma'am, they're not boats." Lyra stepped forward, pale hair catching the wind. "State your purpose." The officer's gaze flicked to her, then to Orethiel towering protectively behind. "That technology embedded in them belongs to our defense division." Rowan felt his stomach drop. "You built those parasites?" "They were energy-harvesting prototypes," she replied evenly. "Meant for emergency battlefield use." Lyra's voice turned ice-cold. "They nearly killed my mother." The officer didn't flinch. "Which is why we're here. We'll need the recovered shards and your research data." Orethiel's wings unfolded slowly, casting a massive shadow over the harbor. The temperature spiked, not threatening yet, but unmistakable. Rowan stepped forward before it escalated. "With respect, ma'am, your prototypes are still out there hurting living creatures. We're building a detection system to stop that." "That system is classified," the officer snapped. "No," Rowan said firmly. "It's life-saving." Silence stretched, thick as storm air. Then something unexpected happened. The Emerald Dragon, the first Rowan had treated, landed heavily behind the convoy vehicles. Another dragon circled overhead. Then another. Not attacking. Present. United. Lyra's heart pounded. This wasn't a threat display. It was solidarity. Orethiel stepped forward beside Rowan. Her silver eyes burned, not with rage, but authority earned through survival. "Your machines harmed us," she said, voice resonating across metal and stone alike. "This human repaired what your division broke. We will not surrender protection for our kind." The officer hesitated for the first time, because this was no longer a lone mechanic and a single dragon. It was a coalition, fire and steel standing together. Rowan met the officer's gaze evenly. "You want cooperation? Then we share knowledge. We prevent more damage. But we don't hand over the cure." The wind whipped across the harbor, carrying heat from dragon breath and the scent of engine oil from Rowan's shop. After a long moment, the officer exhaled slowly. "We will revisit this discussion." The convoy retreated. The tension dissolved like mist under sunlight. Lyra looked at Rowan, half laughing in disbelief. "You argued with armed officials while standing between dragons." He shrugged lightly. "I fix broken things. That includes bad decisions." Above them, Orethiel released a low, warm rumble, the dragon equivalent of pride. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a dying mother had grown into something far larger. Not just healing, not just partnership. A future where humans and dragons no longer faced each other across battle lines, but stood shoulder to wing against shared mistakes. And as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting gold across pearl-white scales and steel rooftops alike, Lyra realized something profound. Her mother hadn't just been repaired. The world had shifted, one careful, stubborn act of compassion at a time. The months that followed were a blend of wonder and chaos. Rowan's small workshop had transformed into a hub of unprecedented collaboration. Dragons of all sizes came, not merely those in need but those curious. Some brought minor injuries, others just wanted to observe. Lyra documented everything, sketching diagrams of internal dragon structures, the strange ways mechanical shards interfered with their magical energy, and Rowan meticulously noted his repairs, often muttering about tolerances and thermal expansion as if he were still tuning a broken engine rather than a living, breathing dragon. Orethiel had recovered fully. Her scales now glowed with a soft luminescence, and she carried herself with the grace of a sovereign returning from exile. Yet she no longer ruled with isolation. She allowed Rowan into the lair, guiding his hands as he inspected Dragon's internal mechanisms, showing him where delicate magic and fragile organs intertwined. Rowan had never touched magic before. Now, every flicker of blue energy, every pulse beneath a dragon's chest, was a tool he could read, repair, or stabilize. Even more astonishing, Kale, Lyra's younger brother, born after the first incident, had begun understanding the dragons intuitively. He could anticipate their movements, coax shy hatchlings from hiding, and even redirect their small flame bursts with his hands, training under Lyra's guidance. One morning, a fleet of emissaries arrived from a distant human city. They had heard rumors of Rowan's feats and the albino dragon thriving behind the workshop. They brought gifts, instruments, reagents, and even mechanical components designed for experimental energy harnessing. Rowan shook his head. "You think we're building weapons here?" Orethiel's tail swished. "We build protection, knowledge, harmony. If you bring only ambition, leave it at the gate." The emissaries hesitated but agreed. Over the next week, they worked side by side with Rowan, Lyra, and the dragons. Knowledge spread like wildfire. The detection system was expanded, capable of scanning entire mountain ranges for foreign tech, alerting dragons before anything could embed. Rowan even adapted tools for non-invasive diagnostics, creating a symbiosis of human engineering and dragon physiology. By nightfall, the harbor glimmered with dragon fire reflecting off steel rooftops. Hatchlings darted across the docks, Sarah leading them in playful loops around boats. Adults soared above, coiling and diving, their scales catching moonlight in cascades of color. Orethiel rested on the cliff edge, gazing at the town below with eyes that had seen death and now recognized life anew. One evening, Rowan, Lyra, and Orethiel stood atop the cliff together, overlooking the calm harbor waters. Rowan handed Orethiel a small device he had built, a stabilizer to prevent power surges in her internal energy channels. "You're trusting me with this?" he asked. Orethiel lowered her massive head, inspecting the device with a careful tilt. "You have saved more than life. You have safeguarded legacy. I trust you as I trust Lyra." Lyra smiled, her heart swelling. "And together we'll protect more. Not just her, not just our city, but every dragon that might fall victim to these machines." Rowan exhaled slowly, marveling at the scope of what had begun as a desperate act of compassion. Funny how saving one dragon leads to saving the world. Orethiel rumbled softly, brushing her massive snout against Rowan's shoulder. A gesture humans would call gratitude, but dragons reserved for bonds forged in trust and survival. From the cliffs above, Kale laughed, racing after a young hatchling who darted between their legs. The boy had inherited Lyra's curiosity and Rowan's steady hands. More importantly, he had inherited the courage to walk beside dragons without fear. That night, as Orethiel coiled protectively around her family and the harbor below, Lyra realized something profound. The impossible had become ordinary. Humans and dragons had found a new path, not of domination, nor of fear, but of understanding, respect, and care. And it all began because one dragon daughter refused to accept her mother's death and one human mechanic refused to walk away. The world had changed, quietly, profoundly, and beautifully. And in the golden glow of moonlight on pearl-white scales, hope burned brighter than any fire. Winter approached, though it was a mild one by the harbor's standards. Snow dusted the rooftops and crested the cliffs, but the dragon's warmth kept the air around Rowan's workshop comfortably temperate. Orethiel had taken to daily flights, circling the city, testing her strength and healing. Her scales shimmered brighter with each passing day, and the rhythm of her powerful wings seemed to energize everyone nearby. Rowan was inside, hunched over his workbench, surrounded by scattered tools and humming devices. Lyra stood beside him, sketching schematics as Orethiel's low hum of contentment vibrated through the building. Kale, now a lively 7-year-old, darted between dragons and humans alike, carrying messages, small tools, or sometimes just laughter. That morning, however, a soft knock at the door drew Rowan's attention. He opened it cautiously, expecting another human emissary or a curious fisherman. Instead, a small group of dragons waited outside, wings folded, eyes gleaming with cautious hope. Among them was a dragon Lyra had never seen before. Scales of molten copper and gold, small but clearly an adult. Lyra gasped. "Visitors!" Rowan wiped his hands and approached. "Not all dragons have learned about this workshop yet." Looks like word travels fast. The copper dragon stepped forward, lowering her massive head so Rowan could inspect her. Around her chest, faint flickers of alien energy pulsed. She hesitated, and then, in a voice like ringing metal softened by wind, she said, "I have come seeking help. My brood has been affected, much like your mother once was." Lyra and Rowan exchanged a glance. They had been preparing for this, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer gravity of another dragon pleading for aid. "Bring her inside," Rowan said. "We'll make room." Over the following hours, the team worked seamlessly. Lyra and Kale channeled warmth, Rowan handled diagnostics, and Arethiel guided every motion with careful observation. By nightfall, the copper dragon rested safely, the pulse of energy stabilizing thanks to Rowan's modifications and Lyra's precise control of heat flow. As the group stepped outside afterward, the harbor was quiet, illuminated by dragon fire and moonlight reflecting off the water. Arethiel perched on the cliff's edge, her eyes scanning the horizon, ever vigilant. Rowan sighed, watching Kale chase after hatchlings weaving between human and dragon alike. "You know," he said quietly, "I thought fixing machines was all I'd ever do. Never imagined this." Lyra smiled softly. "Neither did I. But it's more than fixing machines. It's saving lives, building trust, bridging worlds." Arethiel exhaled, a plume of gentle heat swirling into the night air. She lowered her head until it rested near Rowan's shoulder. "You have done more than repair," she rumbled softly. "You have given hope to dragons and humans alike." Kale, panting from his chase, clambered onto her back for a brief ride. Arethiel's wings folded slightly, letting him perch safely. The sight was almost surreal. Human children laughing atop dragons, adults working side by side with creatures once considered untouchable, and the faint glow of restored energy pulsing through pearl, copper, and emerald scales. Rowan looked out over the harbor, breathing in the mixed scents of saltwater, engine oil, and dragon fire. "The world doesn't know what it's getting into," he said with a small grin. "Let them learn," Lyra replied. "We'll show them another way." Arethiel lifted her massive wings slowly, stretching them over the harbor like a protective canopy. "The future is alive," she rumbled, "and it begins here, with trust, care, and courage." Above them, stars glittered like scattered shards of light. Below, waves lapped against the harbor walls, whispering of change. And in that quiet, extraordinary moment, humans and dragons alike knew one truth. When compassion meets courage, the impossible can rise. Stronger, brighter, and alive. The albino dragon had returned from the brink. And in doing so, she had reshaped the world forever.